The snow came early to Montana that year. In November of 1882, when the aspens should have still held their golden leaves, white powder already dusted the streets of Red Hollow. Martha Eleanor Sutton stood outside the boarding house, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid morning air. Her hands, roughened from years of needlework, clutched a worn leather satchel containing everything she owned. 3 days, Mrs. Harrigan had said, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. I gave you 3 days' grace. Miss Sutton can't run a charity house. Martha hadn't argued. What was there to say? She'd lost her position at Morrison's tailoring shop 2 weeks prior when whispers began circulating about her past. Small towns had long memories, and someone had recognized her from Carson City. The details didn't matter anymore, only that no respectable establishment would hire her now. The wind cut through her thin wool coat as she walked down Main Street. Ice crystals formed on the edges of her dark hair where it escaped from beneath her bonnet. She passed the general store, where Mrs. Whitfield pointedly turned her back. She passed the church, where Reverend Mills pretended not to see her through the window. By the time she reached the post office, her fingers were numb. That's when she saw it. A piece of paper, no bigger than her palm, tacked to the wooden post beside the door. The edges were already curling from the moisture in the air, the ink slightly smudged from snow, but the words were clear enough. You need a home. I need a wife. Have land, have shelter. Don't need love. Just need honest. J. McBride, Eagle Creek Ranch. Martha read it twice. Then a third time. The brevity of it somehow made it more real than the flowery advertisements she'd seen in the matrimonial newspapers. No promises of romance or prosperity. No lies about building a life together filled with happiness. Just facts, plain and simple. She looked around. Main Street was nearly empty in the early morning cold. A few men loaded supplies onto a wagon outside the Mercantile. A dog trotted past, its fur thick with frost. No one was watching her. Martha pulled the paper from the post. The tack came free easily, as if it hadn't been there long. She folded it carefully and placed it in her coat pocket, feeling its weight against her ribs like a secret. Eagle Creek Ranch. She'd heard of it. Most folks in Red Hollow had. It lay 15 miles north, where the valley opened up toward the mountains. The trail was rough, especially with snow coming. But 15 miles was nothing compared to the distance she'd already traveled from Carson City. And what waited for her here in town? Another cold night huddled in a doorway. Another day of turned backs and whispered accusations. Martha shifted her satchel to her other hand and started walking. The first 5 miles took her along the main road, where at least the wagon ruts gave her something to follow. She passed the Turner farm, smoke rising from the chimney, past the old mill, its wheel frozen solid in the creek. Her boots, already worn thin at the soles, let in the cold with each step. But she'd learned long ago that discomfort was just another thing to endure. By noon, she'd reached the fork where the trail split off toward Eagle Creek. Here, the path narrowed, winding through stands of lodgepole pine and bare aspen. The snow was deeper, unmarked by wagon wheels. Only the occasional hoof print suggested anyone had passed this way recently. Martha ate the last of her bread, saved from 2 days ago, while walking. No point in stopping. Movement kept the blood flowing to her feet. The mountains loomed closer now, their peaks lost in low-hanging clouds. Somewhere up there, a man named J. McBride had posted a notice for a wife like someone might post for a lost horse or a farmhand needed. The honesty of it appealed to her, after years of pretending to be someone she wasn't, of smiling when she wanted to weep, of accepting promises that turned to ash. The straightforward nature of his proposition felt like fresh air. He needed a wife. She needed a home. No pretense, no fairy tales. The trail grew steeper. Martha's breath came harder, each exhale a larger cloud in the cold air. Her satchel seemed to grow heavier with each step. Inside were 2 dresses, a handful of undergarments, her mother's Bible, and a small sewing kit. Not much to show for 31 years of living. But then again, she'd learned that possessions were just things to lose. As afternoon shadows lengthened, she began to worry she'd missed the ranch. The notice had given no directions beyond Eagle Creek Ranch, and the trail had split twice more since the main fork. She'd chosen based on which path looked more traveled, but in the snow, it was hard to tell. Then she smelled it. Wood smoke, different from the sharp scent of pine. Following her nose, she rounded a bend and saw a cabin set back from the trail, solid and low to the ground like it had grown from the earth itself. Smoke rose from a stone chimney. A barn stood to one side, and beyond that, a corral where 2 horses stood close together for warmth. Martha stopped at the edge of the clearing. This was it, the moment where she either turned back to town and its cold shoulders, or walked forward into something unknown. The paper in her pocket seemed to pulse with possibility. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years. Sometimes, she'd said on her deathbed, the bravest thing a woman can do is accept help when it's offered honest. This wasn't exactly help. It was a trade, clear and simple, but it was honest, and that was more than she'd had in a long time. Martha walked to the cabin door and knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then heavy footsteps approached from inside. The door opened, and Martha got her first look at J. McBride. He was tall. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Maybe 40, maybe 45. His face had the weathered look of a man who spent his days under the sun and wind. Dark hair shot through with gray at the temples. Hands scarred from work. But it was his eyes that held her attention, gray as the winter sky, steady and appraising without being unkind. Yes, his voice was deep, rusty like he didn't use it much. Martha pulled the paper from her pocket and held it out. "I saw your notice." He looked at the paper, then at her, then back at the paper. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or resignation. "You walked from town?" "Yes. In this weather, I've walked in worse." He studied her for another moment, taking in her worn coat, her practical boots, the straightforward way she met his gaze. Then he stepped back from the door. "Come in. You'll catch your death standing there." The cabin was warm, blessedly warm. Martha stood just inside the door, unsure of the protocol. How did one behave when answering a marriage advertisement she'd never had cause to know? The main room was simple but clean. A large fireplace dominated one wall. A table with 2 chairs sat near the window. Shelves lined another wall, holding dishes, preserves, and books. More books than she'd expected. A rifle hung above the mantel. Everything spoke of a life lived alone, but not carelessly. "Sit," McBride said, gesturing to a chair. "I'll make coffee." Martha sat, placing her satchel carefully beside her feet. She watched as he moved around the small kitchen area with the efficiency of long practice. Neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. Exactly, but it was weighted with possibility. When he placed a cup before her, the warmth of it nearly made her weep. She wrapped her hands around it, letting the heat seep into her bones. "What's your name?" he asked, sitting across from her. "Martha Sutton." Age, 31. Any family? None living. He nodded as if this confirmed something. "You understand what I'm offering? It's not a romantic proposition. I need someone to help run this place. Keep house. Maybe help with the ranch work when needed. In return, you get a roof, food, and my name if you want it." "I understand." Why? The question hung between them. Martha could have made up a story, could have pretended to be a devoted Christian woman seeking to serve, or a romantic soul believing in destiny. Instead, she told the truth. "I need a home. You need a wife. Seems straightforward enough." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That it does." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I won't ask about your past. Don't care to know. What matters is what happens from here forward. Can you cook
Yes.
So, I worked in a tailor shop. Know anything about chickens gardening? I can learn. He nodded again. There's a room off the kitchen. Has its own door to the outside. That'd be yours. I sleep upstairs. We'd take meals together, work together when needed. But your time's your own otherwise. I'm not looking for a servant or a companion. Just someone to share the work of living. Martha considered this. It was more than she'd hoped for. Her own space, clear boundaries, honest expectations. Do I answer now? Take your time. Storm's coming in tonight. You can stay regardless. Head back to town in the morning if you decide against it. But Martha already knew she wouldn't be heading back. There was nothing for her there but cold shoulders and closed doors. Here, at least, was possibility. I don't need until morning. She said, if you'll have me, I accept. McBride extended his hand across the table. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but not crushing. Welcome to Eagle Creek Ranch, Mrs. McBride. Or Miss Sutton, if you prefer. Your choice. Martha thought about it as their hands met. Taking his name would offer protection, respectability. But it also meant binding herself to a stranger based on nothing more than a handful of words on paper and a cup of coffee. Then again, she'd trusted in less and survived. Mrs. McBride, she said, might as well do things proper. This time his smile was fuller, though still reserved. I'll show you to your room. As she followed him through the kitchen, Martha touched the pocket where the paper rested. Such a small thing to change a life. A few words tacked to a post. But then, most of life's biggest changes started small. A chance meeting, a door left open, a piece of paper that said exactly what it meant, no more and no less. Outside, the snow began to fall in earnest, covering her footprints from town as if she'd never walked that way at all. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed pushed against one wall and a chest of drawers opposite. A rag rug covered the plank floor, and a single window looked out toward the barn. Martha set her satchel on the bed and surveyed her new home. It smelled of cedar and linseed oil, as if recently cleaned. Was your wife's room, McBride said from the doorway. He didn't lean against the frame or come inside, just stood there like he was guarding a boundary. She passed 3 winters ago. Fever took her. Martha nodded. She'd suspected as much from the careful way he'd mentioned needing a wife. The emphasis on work rather than companionship. A man who'd loved and lost didn't seek another love easily. I'll have it cleared of anything that troubles you, he continued. Haven't touched much since. It's fine as it is, Martha said. She opened the top drawer of the chest and found it empty, lined with clean paper. The second drawer the same. Only in the bottom drawer did she find evidence of the woman who'd come before. A handful of hairpins and a small tin box containing buttons. I'll leave you to settle. McBride said, supper's at 6. Nothing fancy. He left, and Martha heard his footsteps climb the stairs to his own quarters. She sat on the bed, testing its firmness, then lay back and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, she was alone in a room that belonged to her, with a door she could close and a bed that wasn't rented by the night. She unpacked slowly, placing her 2 dresses in the wardrobe, her undergarments in the drawer. Her mother's Bible went on the small table beside the bed. When she picked up the tin of buttons to move it aside, she hesitated, then put it back where she'd found it. The former Mrs. McBride had collected these buttons for some purpose. Maybe a dress never sewn, maybe just because they were pretty. It seemed wrong to displace them entirely. At 6 o'clock sharp, Martha emerged from her room to find McBride already at the table. He'd set 2 places with blue-rimmed plates and tin cups. A pot of stew sat between them, thick with meat and winter vegetables. Fresh bread, still warm, filled a basket. You baked today, Martha observed, surprised. Every 3rd day, he said. Man can't live on hardtack alone. They ate in silence at first, The stew was good, simple but well seasoned. Martha realized she hadn't had a proper hot meal in days, and it took effort not to eat too quickly. "Tomorrow I'll show you around the place," McBride said eventually. "The root cellar, smokehouse, where things are kept. You'll take over the cooking if that suits you." "It suits me fine. I rise at 5. Earlier in summer. Breakfast doesn't need to be anything elaborate. Coffee, biscuits, maybe eggs when the hens are laying well." "I'm used to early rising." He studied her across the table. "You don't ask many questions." Martha met his gaze. "Neither do you." "Fair enough." He took another bite of stew. "Though I should know. Is there anyone likely to come looking for you husband-family debts that need settling?" "No husband, no family. As for debts," she considered how much to reveal, "I owe nothing to anyone in legal terms. There might be those who feel I owe them something else, but they have no true claim." He seemed to understand what she wasn't saying. "If anyone comes here making claims, they'll find they're not welcome." The simple statement carried weight. Martha had been protected before by men who promised the moon and stars, only to fold at the first sign of trouble. McBride's quiet declaration, devoid of flourish, felt more solid than any grand gesture. After supper, she cleared the dishes without being asked. He showed her where things went, how the pump in the kitchen worked, a luxury she hadn't expected. While she washed, he sat by the fire, a book open on his lap, but his eyes often drifting to the flames. "What do you read?" she asked, drying the last plate. "Whatever I can get. Books are scarce out here." He showed her the cover, The Pilgrim's Progress. "Must have read this one a dozen times. That and the Bible are about all the company I've had some winters." "I could read aloud sometimes," Martha offered, then wondered if she'd overstepped, but he looked pleased. "That'd be welcome. Helen used to—" He stopped, shook his head. "Winter evenings get long." Helen, now the ghost had a name. Martha finished with the dishes and stood uncertainly. In the boarding house, evenings meant retreating to her small space, avoiding the common areas where whispers followed. Here, the main room was warm and inviting, but she didn't know the rules yet. "Sit," McBride said, gesturing to the other chair by the fire. "Unless you're tired from the walk." She sat. The fire crackled. Outside, wind howled around the corners of the cabin. It was the kind of night that made you grateful for walls and a roof, no matter how they'd come to be yours. "I should tell you about the neighbors," McBride said. "The Thorntons have the next ranch over, about 6 miles east. Good people, though Mrs. Thornton gossips something fierce. West is the Baxter place. Keep clear of them. Old man Baxter drinks, and his sons are no better. North is all open range until you hit the reservation." Martha filed this information away. "Do you go to town often?" "Once a month for supplies. Less in winter if we're well stocked." He paused. "You'll come when you need things. I won't keep you prisoner here. But town folk can be—" He searched for words. "They judge hard and forget slow." "I'm acquainted with judgment." They sat quietly after that. Martha found herself stealing glances at her new husband. Strange to think the word, even in her mind. He had a stillness about him, like a man who'd learned to be alone with his thoughts. His hands, resting on the book, bore the scars and calluses of hard work. His profile in the firelight was strong, weathered but not unkind. Near 8 o'clock, he stirred. "I turn in early. Dawn comes quick." He stood, then hesitated. "The bar for your door is there, leaning in the corner. You can drop it in place from inside. I won't take offense." Martha understood what he was telling her, that despite their arrangement, despite the protection of his name, she was safe from unwanted advances. It was more consideration than she'd expected. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and climbed the stairs to his room. Martha sat a while longer by the dying fire, absorbing the strange quiet of her new life. No drunken boarders stumbling down halls, no landlady's sharp voice demanding rent. Just the wind and the settling logs, and somewhere in the walls, the scurry of mice. When she finally retired to her room, she found extra blankets folded at the foot of the bed, placed there while she'd been settling in. She realized the small kindness brought tears to her eyes. She'd been surviving on the grudging charity of others for so long. She'd forgotten what simple consideration felt like. Martha did bar the door that first night, not from fear but from habit. She lay in the narrow bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin, and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the house. Overhead, floorboards creaked as McBride moved about. Then silence. In the darkness, she thought about the woman who'd slept in this bed before her. Helen. Had she answered an advertisement too, or had theirs been a love match, begun in youth and hope? The room gave no clues. It was stripped of personality, just functional furniture and bare walls. But maybe that was better. Martha had no desire to compete with a ghost, to be measured against a memory. She was here to work, to earn her keep and her name. Love had brought her nothing but trouble. This arrangement, practical, honest, clear, suited her fine. The wind picked up, driving snow against the window. Martha burrowed deeper into the blankets, warm for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow she'd learn the workings of this place. She'd prove herself useful, prove McBride hadn't made a mistake taking in a stranger based on nothing more than desperation dressed up as practicality. But tonight, she simply let herself feel grateful for walls that didn't leak, blankets that smelled of cedar, and a door with a bar she could drop or not as she chose. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better, it was real, solid as the log walls around her. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 9 times. Martha closed her eyes and, for the first time since leaving Carson City, slept without fear of tomorrow. Morning came with a soft knock on her door. "Coffee's on," McBride's voice called. Then footsteps retreating, giving her privacy to dress. Martha rose quickly, her body trained by years of early work. She dressed in her second-best dress, her best saved for town or Sundays, and pinned her hair back severely. No point in pretensions here. The main room was warm, the fire already built up. McBride stood at the stove, his back to her, broad shoulders moving as he stirred something in a pan. "Morning," she said. He turned, nodded. "Morning. Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." "Good." He gestured to the table where a cup steamed. "That's for you. Eggs'll be ready shortly." It was the beginning of their pattern-quiet mornings. Necessary words, shared space without intrusion. Martha found the rhythm of it soothing after years of navigating complex social currents, watching every word and gesture for hidden meanings. After breakfast, true to his word, McBride showed her around the homestead. The root cellar first, dug into the hillside and lined with shelves, potatoes, turnips, carrots, onions, enough to last the winter if carefully managed. The smokehouse with its haunches of deer and elk. The chicken coop, currently home to a dozen hens who eyed Martha with suspicion. "They'll warm to you," McBride said, "especially if you bring corn." He showed her the barn, introduced her to the horses, 2 solid work animals named Buck and Sadie, the milk cow, Rosie, who'd go dry soon but would freshen come spring, the barn cats, who scattered at their approach. "They're wild, mostly," he explained. "But they keep the mice down. Helen used to again that quick stop. Well, they earn their keep." Throughout the tour, Martha noticed the small efficiencies of the place. Everything had its spot, its purpose. Tools hung cleaned and oiled. Fence posts stood straight. It spoke of a man who took pride in his work, who understood that survival out here depended on attention to detail. "It's a good place," she said as they walked back to the house. McBride glanced at her, perhaps surprised by the unsolicited comment. "It's what I've made it." That afternoon, while he worked outside, Martha took inventory of the kitchen and pantry. She found Helen's cookbook, notes written in the margins in a careful hand. Needs more salt at this altitude. James likes extra pepper. Instead of feeling like an intrusion, the notes felt like guidance from beyond. One wife to another. She started supper early, choosing a simple roast with vegetables. As she worked, she found herself humming. When had she last done that? The kitchen was well organized, everything within reach. Through the window, she could see McBride splitting wood, the axe rising and falling in steady rhythm. This was her life now, not the life she'd planned as a young girl, full of dreams and romance, but a life nonetheless, with work that mattered and a roof that didn't leak and a man who kept his distance while offering protection. The cats appeared at dusk, slinking from the barn toward the house. Martha watched from the window as they arranged themselves on the porch, waiting. On impulse, she found a bit of leftover stew and stepped outside. They scattered at first, but hunger won over fear. One by one, they crept back, eating quickly while keeping yellow eyes on her. She counted 5, 2 orange, 1 black, 2 tortoiseshell. Making friends. She turned to find McBride watching from the corner of the house. Trying to, she said. Will they come closer? In time, Helen had one that would sit on her lap, but it took months. He paused, and she waited for the usual quick ending to any mention of his wife. Instead, he continued. She said trust was earned in small gestures, consistently given. Martha looked back at the cats, now cleaning their whiskers. Sounds like a wise woman. She was... They stood there a moment, watching the cats finish their meal and melt back into the gathering darkness. Then McBride said, "Supper smells good." "It'll be ready soon." As she turned to go inside, he added, "Martha." She stopped. It was the first time he'd used her name. "I'm glad you answered my notice." The days settled into a rhythm as predictable as sunrise. Martha rose at 5, had coffee ready when McBride came down from his room, and breakfast on the table by 1:30. He ate quickly, efficiently, then headed out to tend the animals while she cleaned up and started on the day's baking or washing or mending. They spoke only of necessary things. "The hen feed's running low. I'll mend that tear in your shirt. Storm coming tonight. I'll bring in extra wood." It was a language stripped to its bones, but Martha found comfort in its simplicity. After years of parsing hidden meanings in every word, of smiling when she wanted to scream, this straightforward exchange felt like breathing clean air. 2 weeks passed before she realized she'd stopped barring her door at night. The kitchen became her domain. She reorganized the shelves to her liking, started a sourdough starter with flour and water, dried herbs from the remnants of Helen's garden. The cookbook with its marginal notes became her guide. Never fails. Helen had written beside a cornbread recipe, and she was right. It never did. Martha took to baking in the quiet afternoon hours when McBride was out working the range. The cabin filled with the smell of fresh bread, pies when she could spare the sugar, biscuits that she wrapped in clean cloth for his saddlebags when he rode out early. He never thanked her directly, but she'd find little things left on the kitchen table, a handful of late berries picked from some hidden thicket, a piece of honeycomb wrapped in leaves. Once, a small sack of white flour from town, though she hadn't asked for it. The cats began to expect her. Each evening, she'd step onto the porch with scraps, and they'd appear from their hiding spots. The boldest, an orange tom with half an ear missing, would come within arm's reach. The others kept their distance but no longer fled at her appearance. "That one's called Brutus," McBride told her one evening, nodding at the orange tom. "On account of his fighting, the black one's Midnight. Predictable as that is, the others never got names." "And you don't feed them?" "Barn cats feed themselves, mice and such." But she'd seen him toss them meat scraps when he thought she wasn't looking. It was these small contradictions that began to form her understanding of him. A man who claimed to need only a working partner, but who'd cleaned and prepared a room with careful thought. Who spoke of practical matters but kept books of poetry mixed in with his farming almanacs. Who said grace before meals in a quiet voice that suggested actual gratitude rather than rote habit? One night, 3 weeks after her arrival, the promised storm finally hit. It had been building all day. The sky heavy and dark, the animals restless. McBride worked late securing everything, and Martha kept supper warm past the usual hour. When he finally came in, snow covered his shoulders and ice hung from his beard. "It's a bad one," he said, stomping his boots. "Might be snowed in for days." Martha ladled stew while he dried off by the fire. They ate as wind howled around the cabin, making the walls creak. Halfway through the meal, the lights flickered, then died. "Oil's out," McBride muttered. He moved surely in the darkness, finding candles, lighting them from the fire. The room filled with dancing shadows. "I can read now, if you'd like," Martha offered, "while we have the firelight." He settled in his chair, and she retrieved his Bible, easier to read than the small print of his other books. She chose Psalms, her voice steady in the storm-wrapped darkness. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." As she read, she became aware of his stillness. Not the tense stillness of waiting, but something deeper. When she glanced up, his eyes were closed, not in sleep but in something like peace. She read until her voice grew hoarse, working through the familiar passages. The storm raged outside, but inside, the circle of firelight held them safe. When she finally closed the book, McBride opened his eyes. "Helen used to read to me," he said. "I'd forgotten how settling it is. Would you rather I didn't if it brings difficult memories?" He shook his head slowly. "Memories aren't difficult. It's the absence that's hard. Having you read, it fills some of that absence without trying to replace what was." Martha understood. She had her own absences, her own ghosts. "I could read most evenings, if you'd like, when the work's done." "I'd like that." They sat quietly as the fire burned lower. Then McBride stirred. "I should tell you something. About Helen." Martha waited, not pushing. "She wasn't my first wife. We married late. I was 35. She was past 30. Both of us had lived life before, made mistakes, lost people." He stared into the flames. "When we found each other, we didn't expect grand passion, just wanted companionship, honesty, someone to share the work." "And did you find that—" A small smile touched his weathered face. "We did, and more. In time. Love grows in unexpected soil sometimes." He looked at her directly. "I'm telling you this so you understand. I know what it is to start over, to build something from practicality and have it become real." Martha's throat tightened. "Thank you for telling me." He nodded and rose. "Storm might take down the henhouse roof. I'll need to check it come morning." After he went upstairs, Martha banked the fire and prepared for bed. The storm still raged, but inside her room, wrapped in quilts that smelled of cedar, she felt a different kind of warmth. Not the heat of passion or romance. She'd had enough of those flames that burned bright and left only ash. This was steadier, like the coals that lasted through the night. The storm continued for 3 days. They fell into a different rhythm, shaped by shared confinement. McBride taught her to play checkers with a set he'd carved himself. She showed him a card game her mother had loved. They read by turns, she from the Bible or Pilgrim's Progress, he from an old almanac, sharing odd facts about planting by moon phases and weather signs. On the second night, he brought out a harmonica. "Do you play?" Martha asked, surprised. "Poorly," but he lifted it to his lips and played a simple melody, Red River Valley, slow and mournful. When he finished, he held it out. "You." "I never learned." "Not much to learn, just breathe and feel for the notes." She tried, producing squeaks and wheezes that made them both laugh. When had she last laughed? He showed her how to hold it, how to shape her mouth. By the end of the evening, she could manage a rough version of "Oh, Susanna." The third day, the storm began to break. Sun pierced the clouds by afternoon, setting the snow-covered world a-blittering. McBride headed out to check the damage while Martha took inventory of their supplies. They'd eaten well into the stores, but nothing critical. That evening, as she prepared supper, she heard music from the porch, through the window. She saw McBride sitting on the steps, playing his harmonica while the barn cats gathered at a safe distance. The orange Tom, Brutus, sat closest, tail wrapped around his feet. She listened while peeling potatoes, the lonely melody mixing with a drip of melting snow from the eaves. This was her life now, not what she'd dreamed as a girl, not what she'd run from in Carson City, but something altogether different, something that might, given time and patience, grow into more than mere survival. When McBride came in, she had coffee ready. He wrapped his cold hands around the cup, nodding his thanks. "How's the hen house?" "Roof held, barely. I'll need to shore it up tomorrow." He paused. "You could come out. Meet the chickens proper. They need to know who's feeding them." It was the first time he'd suggested they work together on something. Martha nodded. "I'd like that." That night, she didn't read. Instead, they sat by the fire while he showed her how to oil and mend harness leather. A useful skill, he said, for when he was out on the range. His hands guided hers, showing the right pressure, the proper technique. They were the hands of a man who'd known work all his life. Careful and patient. "You learn quick," he said. "I've had to—" He glanced at her but didn't pursue it. That was their way acknowledgement without intrusion. But Martha found herself wanting to offer something, some small piece of her past to balance what he'd shared about Helen. "I was married before," she said, keeping her eyes on the leather. "Young, 16. He was charming, full of promises." She paused, choosing words carefully. "Promises are easier than keeping them. He left after 2 years, went west to find gold and never came back. Divorce. Abandonment. Judge granted it after 7 years. She met his eyes. That's what they whispered about in town. Divorced woman. Other things too, but that started it." McBride's expression didn't change. Townfolk got nothing better to do than mind other people's business. He took the leather from her hands, inspecting her work. "This is good. You'll do fine." And that was all. No judgment, no questions, no attempt to offer comfort she didn't need. Just acceptance. Simple and clean as fresh snow. Later, lying in her narrow bed, Martha thought about roots, how they grew slow and deep, finding purchase in unlikely ground. She'd blown like tumbleweeds through so many towns, never staying long enough to grow anything real. But here, in this cabin at the edge of wilderness, with a man who played harmonica for barn cats and read the almanac like scripture, she might finally grow still enough to take root. Outside her window, an owl called across the snow-bright night. Another answered from the barn. The world was full of paired things, matched by choice or circumstance, staying together for warmth, for hunting, for the simple comfort of not being alone. Martha pulled the quilts higher and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd meet the chickens properly. She'd learn their personalities, their laying habits, which ones pecked and which ones allowed touch. Small knowledge, but real. The kind you could build a life on, one gathered egg at a time. In his room overhead, she heard McBride's footsteps, then the creak of his bed. Soon his snoring drifted down, not loud, just present, another sound to add to the night music of settling wood and prowling cats and wind in the pines. The sounds of home, or what might become home if she let it. For the first time since leaving Carson City, Martha fell asleep without counting the money in her pockets or planning escape routes. She simply slept, warm and safe, while snow melted from the roof and ran down to water the earth where spring would eventually come, where gardens would grow, where life, patient and persistent as always, would find a way to bloom. The first sign of acceptance came not from McBride, but from the cats, the orange Tom. Brutus began following Martha from the house to the henhouse each morning. He'd sit outside while she gathered eggs, tail twitching at the sounds of disturbed chickens. Then he'd escort her to the root cellar, the smokehouse, wherever her morning rounds took her. "Looks like you've got yourself a shadow," McBride observed one morning, watching from the barn door. "He seems to think I need supervision," Martha replied, stepping carefully around Brutus, who had planted himself directly in her path. "Or protection. He's appointed himself guardian before." Within a week, the other cats began to follow Brutus's lead. The black one, Midnight, would appear at the kitchen window, watching Martha knead bread. The two tortoiseshells, whom Martha had privately named Sage and Pepper, took to sleeping on the porch steps, moving only reluctantly when humans needed to pass. The fifth cat, a small gray tabby, remained skittish, but even she began to linger at feeding time, grabbing her portion and retreating only as far as the porch rail instead of disappearing entirely. "Never seen them warm to someone so quick," McBride said one evening. They sat on the porch despite the cold, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The cats were arranged around them like a small congregation. "Maybe they were just waiting," Martha said, "for someone to notice them properly." She felt rather than saw him glance at her. Maybe they were. The next morning brought the first real test of their arrangement. McBride came down with his jaw set, a letter in his hand. "Need to go to town," he said. "Bank business. Can't be put off." Martha kept her hands steady as she poured his coffee. Town meant questions, stares, whispers. "I have a list, if you're going. Though you might come along. Get your measure for winter boots at Morrison's." Morrison's, where she'd worked, where they'd told her not to return. Martha's throat tightened. "I don't need—" "You do." His tone was mild but firm. "Those boots you're wearing won't last another month, and we're a long way from spring." He paused. "Unless there's reason you'd rather not." Here was the moment to tell him about Morrison's, about the accusations, about why she'd really left town. Instead, she heard herself say, "No reason. I'll get my coat." The ride to town took 3 hours. They sat side by side on the wagon seat, not touching but aware of each other. McBride handled the team with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. Martha found herself studying his profile, the way he squinted against the winter sun, the patient set of his shoulders. "Nervous?" he asked without looking at her. "Should I be—" "Town can be hard on newcomers, harder on women who—" He searched for words. "Who don't fit their notion of proper—" "I'm familiar with their notions." "I imagine you are." He adjusted the reins. "Here's what we'll do. Bank first, then Morrison's, then supplies. Anyone gives you trouble. You tell me." "I can handle." "I know you can, but you're Mrs. McBride now. That carries weight. Whether folks approve or not, might as well use it." Red Hollow looked smaller than she remembered. The same false-fronted buildings lined Main Street. The same dog slept in the weak sun, but riding in beside McBride, wearing the ring he'd given her, his mother's ring, simple gold worn thin. Martha felt the shift in her position. At the bank, the clerk's eyes widened when McBride introduced her as his wife. "Didn't know you'd remarried, Mr. McBride." "No reason you should need to add her to the account." Simple as that. Martha signed her new name with a steady hand while the clerk watched nervously. Word would spread within the hour. The hermit rancher had taken a wife, and not just any wife, but that woman from the tailor shop. Morrison's was next. Martha's stomach knotted as they approached, but McBride's hand on her elbow steadied her. The bell jangled as they entered. And Mrs. Morrison looked up from her fabric display. Her face went through several expressions before settling on forced politeness. "Mr. McBride," and she couldn't quite bring herself to say it. "My wife needs winter boots," McBride said calmly. "Good ones, the kind that last." "Mr. Morrison emerged from the back room. His face reddened when he saw Martha, but McBride's presence kept him civil. They conducted the fitting in tense silence, Martha sitting rigid while Mr. Morrison measured her feet without meeting her eyes. "They'll be ready in a week," he muttered. "Good." McBride counted out payment. "We'll collect them then." Outside, Martha released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Thank you." "For what getting you boots you need." But his hand touched her back briefly, guiding her toward the general store. "Come on, worst is over." The general store was busy with Saturday shoppers. Conversations stuttered and stopped as they entered. Martha felt the weight of stares, heard the whispers starting behind raised hands. She kept her chin up, focusing on McBride's solid presence beside her. "Mrs. McBride." The voice was warm, unexpected. Martha turned to find a woman about her own age, plain-faced but smiling. "I'm Anna Thornton. We're neighbors, after a fashion. James mentioned you'd arrived." Neighbors, the Thorntons, from 6 miles east. The woman McBride had warned gossiped something fierce, but her smile seemed genuine, her handshake firm. "Pleased to meet you," Martha managed. "I imagine it's overwhelming, coming to town after being out at the ranch. Lord knows I felt like a specimen under glass my first few months." Anna lowered her voice. "It does get easier, and having the McBride name helps. James is respected, even if he does keep to himself." They chatted briefly about ranch life, weather, the challenges of keeping chickens through winter. Normal conversation, as if Martha were any other rancher's wife. When Anna moved on to her shopping, Martha felt something ease in her chest. The rest of the trip passed without major incident. A few people pointedly turned away. Others nodded coldly. But several men tipped their hats to McBride and included Martha in the gesture. The shopkeeper filled their order without comment, though his wife peered from behind the curtain with obvious curiosity. "Loading the supplies," McBride said. "You did well." "I didn't do anything." "You held your head up, didn't run. That's something." He helped her onto the wagon seat. "Anna Thornton's a good woman, even if she does talk too much. She'll spread word that you're respectable." "That helps." "And if she spreads other words?" "Then we'll deal with that when it comes." He clicked to the horses. "Can't control what people say. Martha, can only control how we live." The ride home was quieter, both lost in thought. As the ranch came into view, Martha felt the tension leave her shoulders. The cabin looked welcoming in the afternoon light, smoke rising from the chimney she'd fed before leaving. The cats emerged from various hiding spots, Brutus in the lead. "Home," McBride said, and Martha realized it was the first time he'd used the word to include her. That evening, she made a special dinner venison roast with the last of the autumn vegetables, apple pie from the cellar stores. McBride ate with obvious appreciation, cleaning his plate and accepting seconds. "This about today?" he asked finally. "Maybe, partly." Martha poured coffee. "Partly just grateful." "Nothing to be grateful for. We're partners. Partners stand together." After dinner, she read while he worked on repairing a bridle. The cats arranged themselves around the room. Brutus by Martha's feet, Midnight on the windowsill, the tortoiseshells by the fire. Even the gray tabby had ventured inside, curled in the corner farthest from the humans but still present. "Full house tonight," McBride observed. "They know it's getting colder, looking for warm spots. Smart creatures." He held up the repaired bridle, examining his work. "Helen always said animals were good judges of character. They know who to trust." Martha looked around at the cats, all in various states of relaxation. "What does it mean if they trust us both?" "Means we're worth trusting, I suppose." He set the bridle aside. "Or at least worth the chance of warm spots and regular meals." "Practical creatures, then. Most living things are, when you get down to it." He stood, stretching. I'll be out early tomorrow. Need to check the fence lines before the next storm. I'll pack food for your saddlebags. He paused at the stairs. Martha, today in town, you've got nothing to be ashamed of. Whatever happened before, whoever you were, that's done. You're here now. That's what matters. After he went up, Martha sat surrounded by cats and quietude. She thought about acceptance, how it came in small doses, unexpected moments, a cat choosing to follow you, a neighbor offering friendship, a man standing beside you when the whole world wanted to stare. She'd spent so long running from her past, she'd forgotten it was possible to simply turn and face it. To say yes, this happened, but here's what happens next. McBride understood that. He'd lost a wife, started over, built something new. Not a replacement for what was gone, but something different, valuable in its own right. The gray tabby crept closer, drawn by the fire's warmth. Martha held still, not wanting to spook her. Inch by inch, the little cat approached until she was within arm's reach, still too skittish to touch, but present, willing to try. That's all any of us can do, Martha whispered. Just be willing to try. The tabby's ears flicked at her voice, but she didn't retreat. Progress, small but real. Like everything else in this new life, the daily rhythms, the growing trust, the sense of belonging that crept in as quiet as a cat. Martha banked the fire and prepared for bed, the cats scattering to their preferred sleeping spots. Tomorrow she'd pack food for McBride's saddlebags. She'd tend the chickens, milk the cow, keep the fire burning. Simple tasks, but they added up to something larger, a life built on mutual need and growing respect. In her room, she found a package on her bed, brown paper tied with string. Inside, a pair of thick wool socks and a note in McBride's careful hand, for until the boots arrive. J. Martha held the socks, feeling their warmth and weight. Such a practical gift, but somehow more meaningful than any flowers or fancy words. He'd noticed her thin socks, thought ahead to her comfort, taken action without fuss or expectation of thanks. This was courtship at its most basic. Attention paid, needs met, trust built one day at a time. Not the stuff of romance novels or grand gestures. Just two people learning to share space, to count on each other, to build something sturdy enough to weather whatever storms might come. Martha put on the socks, wiggling her toes in their warmth. Through her window, she could see stars beginning to appear, bright and cold in the clear sky. Somewhere in the barn, Brutus was probably hunting mice. Somewhere in the house, McBride was settling for sleep, trusting her to wake early and have his coffee ready. Small trusts, small acceptances, but like the cats creeping closer to the fire, they added up to something larger, something that might, given time and patience, be called home. Word of the marriage spread through Red Hollow like wildfire in dry grass. Within 2 weeks, Martha couldn't walk from the henhouse to the root cellar without feeling watched, even though the nearest neighbor was 6 miles away. The sensation crawled up her spine whenever she ventured into the yard. You're imagining things, she told herself. But then Anna Thornton appeared one morning, driving her wagon at a clip that suggested urgent news rather than social calling. Martha, Anna climbed down before the wheels stopped rolling. I thought you should know. There's talk in town. Martha's hand stilled on the egg basket. There's always talk in town. This is different. Anna glanced toward the house, then lowered her voice. Someone's been asking about you, a man from Carson City. The egg suddenly felt fragile as blown glass in Martha's hands. She set the basket down carefully. What kind of man? Well-dressed, smooth-talking. Says he's looking for his wife. Anna's eyes were sympathetic but curious. Says she left without word, took things that weren't hers to take. Martha's throat constricted. After all these months, all these miles. And people are believing him. Some are, some aren't. Anna touched Martha's arm. James McBride's name carries weight, but this man, he's got a way about him. Makes people want to believe. He's staying at the hotel, buying drinks, telling stories. Stories. Martha tasted bile. She knew what kinds of stories Robert would tell, how he'd paint himself the wronged husband, her the faithless wife. Never mind that he'd left first, that the things she'd taken were her own earnings, that the marriage had been over in all but law long before she'd walked away. "What does James know?" Anna asked. "He knows I was married before, knows it ended badly. But not the details." Martha shook her head. Their arrangement was built on not asking for details, on accepting each other as they were now. But now the past had grown legs and followed her here. "You should tell him," Anna said, "before this man, what's his name?" "Robert Finch." The name felt like poison on her tongue. "Before this Finch fellow decides to pay a visit." After Anna left, trailing promises to set people straight and give that man a piece of my mind, Martha stood in the yard, paralyzed. The cats wound around her ankles, but even Brutus's headbutts couldn't break through her fog. She'd been foolish to think she could outrun the past. Robert had always been persistent when he wanted something, and what he wanted was control. Not her, never her, really. Just the power to say where she went, what she did, who she became. McBride was out checking the fence lines. Wouldn't be back until evening. Martha went through the motions of her day: bread baked, floors swept, dinner started, but her mind churned. Should she pack now? Leave before Robert arrived? It would break their agreement. But better that than bringing trouble to McBride's door. But where would she go? Winter was closing in. Her savings were meager. And despite everything, the thought of leaving this place, the cats, the chickens, the quiet evenings by the fire, hit her like a physical pain. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the horse approaching until Brutus growled, low and warning. Martha looked up from the stove to see a figure dismounting in the yard. Robert Finch looked exactly as he had 2 years ago. Same easy smile, same expensive clothes, same way of moving like he owned whatever ground he stood on. Seeing him here, in this place she'd begun to think of as safe, made her stomach turn. "Hello? Martha?" He tied his horse to the fence post like he had every right. "You're looking well. Ranch life agrees with you. You need to leave." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Now, is that any way to greet your husband?" He stepped onto the porch, and Brutus positioned himself between them, back arched. Robert eyed the cat with amusement. "Made some new friends, I see. I'm not your wife anymore. The law said so." "The law?" He smiled, that practiced smile that had once charmed her. Funny thing about the law, it can be interpreted different ways, especially when new information comes to light. "What do you want, Robert?" "What I've always wanted, you." He leaned against the porch rail, casual as if they were discussing weather. "See, I've had some troubles lately. Bad investments, people wanting money I don't have. Then I remembered my dear wife, who disappeared so sudden. Took some things with her, I seem to recall. My mother's jewelry, my earnings from 3 years of sewing, nothing that was yours." "That's not how I remember it." His eyes were cold despite the smile. "In fact, I remember quite a bit of money going missing. My money. Enough that I might have to involve the law. Unless my loving wife comes home where she belongs, helps me through this difficult time, shows the creditors that I'm a stable family man, worth extending terms to." Martha gripped the door frame. "I have a new life now, a new name." McBride?" "Yes, I heard." Robert's smile turned predatory. "Bigamy's a serious crime. Martha, you sure this McBride fellow knows he's harboring a woman who's still legally married?" "The divorce was final." "Was it? Because I've got a lawyer saying maybe it wasn't. Technicalities. You understand. Forms not filed properly. Notices not served correctly." He straightened, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. "Of course. If you come with me now, quiet-like, none of that needs to come up. McBride keeps his reputation. You keep your secrets. Everyone's happy." Everyone except me. You'll be taken care of. I've changed. Martha, this trouble's taught me to value what I had. The lie came so smoothly, she might have believed it once. Just need some time to get back on my feet. Few months. Maybe. Then, if you want that divorce, we'll do it proper. A few months. She knew what that meant. A few months would become a year, then 2, then forever. She'd be trapped again. But worse, because now she knew what freedom tasted like. I need time to think, she said. Sure, I'm at the hotel in town, but don't think too long. He glanced around the ranch. Nice place McBride's got here. Shame if his name got dragged through mud over a bigamy scandal. He mounted his horse and rode off, tipping his hat like a gentleman caller. Martha stood frozen until he disappeared over the ridge. Then her knees gave out, and she sank onto the porch steps. The cats gathered around her. Brutus climbed into her lap, purring aggressively. Midnight pressed against her side. Even the gray tabby crept close, offering what comfort she could. What am I going to do? Martha whispered. They had no answer, only warmth and presence. She was still sitting there when McBride rode in at dusk. He took one look at her face and dismounted quickly, ground tying his horse. What happened? The words tumbled out. Anna's visit, Robert's appearance, his threats. McBride listened without interrupting, his expression growing stonier with each detail. When she finished, he sat beside her on the steps. This Finch, he hurt you before. Not physically, but he made me small, made me doubt everything I thought, everything I was, twisted words until I couldn't tell truth from lies anymore. And now he wants you back. He wants someone to blame for his troubles, someone to control. Martha twisted her hands. I should leave, before he causes problems for you. No. The word was flat, final. Martha looked at him in surprise. This is your home now. McBride said, You don't run from your own home because some snake comes slithering around. He was quiet a moment. You really think I care what town gossip's about? They've been talking about me for years. Hermit McBride. Crazy McBride, who lives alone with his grief. Adding bigamy to the list won't change much. It's not just gossip. If he's right about the divorce. Is he? Martha thought back to that day in court. The judge's words. The papers she'd signed. I don't know. I thought it was final, but Robert always could make me doubt my own memory. Then we'll find out for certain. There's a lawyer in Bozeman. Good man. We'll go tomorrow. Get this sorted legal and proper. And if it wasn't final, if we're really... She couldn't finish. Then we'll fix it, whatever it takes. He stood, offering her his hand. But Finch doesn't get to threaten you. Doesn't get to come on my land and make you feel small again. That's done. Martha took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Why, we barely know each other. This isn't what you signed up for. I signed up for a partner. Partners face troubles together. His hand was warm, calloused, steady. Besides, the cats would never forgive me if I let you go. Despite everything, Martha felt a smile tug at her lips. Just the cats. Well, he released her hand, color rising in his weathered cheeks. I might miss your cornbread, too. That night, Martha barely slept. Every sound made her think Robert had returned. When she did doze, she dreamed of small rooms and smaller lives, of smiles that never reached eyes and words that cut deeper than knives. But morning came, as it always did. McBride had coffee ready when she emerged, and a determination in his eyes that steadied her. Eat, he said, pushing a plate toward her. Long ride to Bozeman. They left the cats in charge of the ranch and set out before full light. The ride was cold but clear. Mountains etched sharp against the sky. McBride had brought the wagon rather than riding. And Martha appreciated the thoughtfulness. Easier to talk sitting side by side than one behind the other on horseback. Tell me about the divorce, he said when they cleared the valley. Everything you remember. So she did. The abandonment, The 7 years of waiting, the court proceedings. McBride listened, asking occasional questions, building the shape of the thing in his mind. "Sounds legal to me," he said finally. "But we'll know for certain soon." The lawyer in Bozeman, Mr. Davidson, was everything Robert's supposed lawyer wasn't. Methodical, honest, clear-eyed. He took Martha's information and promised to telegraph the courthouse in Carson City immediately. "These things can be verified quick enough," he assured them. "If the divorce was granted, there'll be records. No amount of smooth talking changes paperwork." They had time to kill while waiting for responses. McBride suggested lunch at the hotel, but Martha couldn't stomach the thought of food. Instead, they walked the streets of Bozeman, larger and busier than Red Hollow. "I'm sorry," Martha said suddenly, "for bringing this trouble to you." "You didn't bring anything. Finch brought himself." McBride paused at a shop window. "Martha, I need you to understand something. When I posted that notice, I wasn't looking for a perfect person with no past, just someone honest enough to build something with. You've been that. Rest is just weather to get through." By afternoon, Davidson had answers. The divorce was indeed final, properly filed and recorded. He'd gotten copies of the documentation telegraphed through clear as day. "Mr. Finch has no legal claim," Davidson said. "Any suggestion otherwise is pure intimidation." Relief made Martha's knees weak. McBride's hand on her elbow steadied her. "What about his threats?" McBride asked. "Coming around, making accusations. Harassment, possibly extortion if he's demanding money." Davidson made notes. "I can write a formal cease and desist letter, make it clear any further contact will result in legal action." "Do it," McBride said. On the ride home, Martha felt pounds lighter. The sun was setting, painting the mountains gold and pink. The cats met them at the gate, Brutus loudly expressing his displeasure at being abandoned all day. "Thank you," Martha said as McBride helped her down from the wagon. "For believing me, for helping." "Nothing to thank me for." He unhitched the horses, movements efficient. "Man threatens my wife. I take action, simple as that." "My wife?" He'd said it so naturally, like it was just fact. Martha felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of guards she'd held for so long. That evening, as she read by the fire and he mended tack, the world felt properly ordered again. The cats arranged themselves around the room. The fire crackled. Outside, wind sang through the pines, but inside was warm and safe and hers by right of law and choice, both. "I should tell you," McBride said suddenly. "If Finch comes back, I won't be civilized about it." Martha looked up from her book. His face was calm, but his hands had stilled on the leather. "I'm not a violent man," he continued. "But there's limits. He threatened you, made you afraid in your own home. That's across the line. He might not come back. The lawyer's letter might work, might not. Either way, you should know where I stand." Martha nodded. Throat tight. After years of facing troubles alone, having someone else say "we" and "together" felt like learning a new language. The lawyer's letter must have arrived, because for 3 days there was peace. Martha began to breathe easier, the knot between her shoulders slowly loosening. She threw herself into preparing for deeper winter, canning the last vegetables from the root cellar, patching gaps in the henhouse walls, teaching herself to knit warmer socks from wool McBride had traded for. On the 4th day, she was alone when Robert returned. McBride had ridden out before dawn to help the Thorntons with a sick horse. Martha was in the yard, scattering corn for the chickens, when she heard hoofbeats. Her blood knew before her eyes confirmed. Robert, but not alone this time. 2 men flanked him, rough-looking types with hard faces and harder eyes. "Martha." Robert dismounted, smooth as silk. "I got the lawyer's letter. Very official, very threatening." He smiled that cold smile. "Did you really think paper would stop me?" "Get off this land!" Martha's voice came out steady despite her racing heart. "Your husband's not here to hide behind today." Robert stepped closer. The chickens scattered, squawking. "Just you and me in a conversation we need to finish." "And them," Martha nodded at his companions. "Insurance, in case McBride shows up unexpected." Robert's smile widened. "Though from what I hear, he's at the Thornton place. Won't be back for hours." How did he know that Martha's mind raced? Someone in town must be feeding him information. She backed toward the house, but one of the men moved to cut her off. Now, Robert said. "No need for dramatics. Just come with me quiet-like. Sign a paper saying you owe me money. Call it a loan. Very official. Then we'll discuss terms of repayment." "I owe you nothing." "Jury might see it different, especially when I explain how you cleaned out our savings before disappearing, how you left me near destitute." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Sign this, and maybe I don't pursue criminal charges." Martha saw the trap clear as day. Sign, and he'd have leverage forever. "Refuse and—" She looked at the two men, their hands resting casual on their gun belts. That's when Brutus appeared. The orange Tom materialized from nowhere, placing himself between Martha and Robert. His back arched, fur standing on end, a low growl building in his throat. Well, Robert said. "The guard cat." He took a step forward. Brutus launched himself at Robert's face. It happened so fast Martha barely saw it. Orange fury. Claws and teeth. Robert screaming and stumbling backward. His men reached for their guns, but suddenly cats were everywhere. Midnight dropped from the roof onto one man's head. Sage and Pepper darted between the other's legs, tripping him. Even the timid gray tabby appeared, hissing and spitting like a tiny demon. In the chaos, Martha ran for the house. Behind her, Robert cursed and shouted, trying to fend off Brutus, who seemed determined to remove his face. She grabbed the rifle from above the mantel, hands shaking but sure. Her father had taught her to shoot, years ago. Some skills you didn't forget. She made it back to the porch as Robert finally managed to fling Brutus away. The cat landed on his feet, ready for another round. Blood streaked Robert's face from multiple scratches. "Enough," Martha chambered around, the sound cutting through the chaos. Everyone froze. "Get off my land, now!" "You won't shoot," Robert said, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Try me." Martha kept the rifle steady. "I've got 5 cats as witnesses that you came here threatening me. Who do you think the sheriff will believe?" One of his men tugged at Robert's sleeve. "This ain't worth what you're paying us." Robert shrugged him off, eyes locked on Martha. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." McBride's voice came from behind them. He sat his horse at the yard's edge, his own rifle laid casual across his saddle. "Gentlemen, we're just leaving. The Thorntons' sick horse must not have been as bad as feared. Or maybe McBride had sensed trouble. Either way, he was here now. And the shift in Robert's expression said he understood how things had changed. 3 against 1, Robert tried. "Those aren't good odds. McBride?" 3 against 2, McBride corrected calmly. "My wife's a fair shot. Plus, you've already met our cats. But if you want to test it—" He shifted slightly, rifle still casual but ready. Robert's men were already backing toward their horses. After a long moment, Robert followed, trying to salvage dignity from retreat. Blood still seeped from the scratches on his face. "You'll regret this," he told Martha. "Only thing I regret is wasting years on you." The words came out stronger than she felt. "Don't come back, Robert. Next time I might not call the cats off." They watched the 3 men mount and ride away. Only when they disappeared over the ridge did Martha lower the rifle. Her hands shook now, adrenaline fading. McBride dismounted and crossed to her in 3 quick strides. "You hurt?" "No, the cats." She looked around. Brutus sat cleaning blood from his claws, looking immensely pleased with himself. The others had arranged themselves around the yard like small sentries. I saw, McBride said. Reminded me I should never make them angry. He took the rifle from her gently. You would have shot him. If he'd come closer, yes. Good. He studied her face. You're sure you're not hurt? I'm sure. How did you know to come back? Didn't feel right, leaving you alone with him, sniffing around town. He glanced at Brutus. Though seems you had better protection than I could offer. Martha sank onto the porch steps, legs suddenly weak. McBride sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. It's not over, she said. He'll try something else. Maybe. But he's shown his true face now. Won't be so easy to play the wronged husband with claw marks to explain. He paused. I'll ride to town tomorrow. Have a word with the sheriff. Make sure he knows what happened here. The sheriff won't care about my word against Roberts. He'll care about mine. And the Thorntons saw me riding back hell-bent. They'll vouch. McBride's jaw set. Finch made a mistake coming here with hired thugs. That's not heartbroken husband behavior. That's criminal. They sat quietly as the afternoon shadows lengthened. The cats began to converge. Brutus first as always. He jumped into Martha's lap, purring like nothing had happened. Just another day defending his territory. Thank you, Martha murmured, stroking his battle-scarred head. We should get them something special for dinner, McBride said. Heroes deserve rewards. The last of the cream. Seems fitting. They stood to go inside, but McBride caught her arm gently. Martha, what you did, standing up to him, protecting yourself, that took courage. I was terrified. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about acting despite the fear. His hand was warm through her sleeve. I'm proud to call you wife. The words hung between them, weightier than usual. Martha met his eyes, saw something there that hadn't been before, or maybe it had, and she just hadn't been ready to see it. James, she said, using his given name for the first time. I'm glad I answered your notice. So am I. Inside, Martha set out cream for the cats while McBride cleaned the rifle. They worked in companionable silence, but the air felt charged somehow. A line had been crossed today, not just in facing down Robert, but in how they'd stood together. Over dinner, McBride said. I've been thinking, come spring, we could add onto the house, extra room or two, maybe a proper parlor. That's ambitious. Ranch is doing well, and he focused on his plate. Might be we'll need more space eventually. Martha's breath caught. Was he suggesting what she thought eventually? If you wanted, we haven't discussed. That is, our arrangement didn't include. He cleared his throat. What I'm trying to say is, you're my wife-in-law. But if you wanted to be my wife in truth, I'd be amenable. Amenable. Such a McBride word. Understated, practical, hiding depths of meaning. Martha found herself smiling despite the day's trauma. I might be amenable too, she said, eventually. Color rose in his cheeks, but he smiled back. No rush. We've got time. That night, Martha didn't immediately retreat to her room after the dishes were done. Instead, she sat by the fire, working on her knitting while McBride read aloud from the almanac. The cats draped themselves over furniture and humans alike. Brutus claiming pride of place on Martha's lap. Says here cats can predict weather. McBride read, when they wash behind their ears, rain's coming. What about when they attack unwanted visitors? Doesn't say, though I'd guess that predicts trouble leaving in a hurry. Martha laughed, surprising herself. After the fear and tension of the day, laughter felt like rebellion. McBride set the almanac aside. He won't be back, Martha, not after today. How can you be sure? Because he's a coward at heart. Comes with hired men because he can't face things alone. Gets bloodied by a cat and runs. He shook his head. Men like that only push when they think they'll win easy. You showed him different. We showed him. The cats and I couldn't have stood him off without you coming back. Maybe not, but you were ready to try. He looked at her across the small space between their chairs. That's what matters. That you were ready to fight for this place. For this life. This life. Martha considered the words, felt their weight. When had this arrangement become a life? When had the cabin become home? The daily rhythms become comfort? The man across from her become essential? I should tell you something, she said, about what you suggested earlier, about being wife in truth. McBride went still, waiting. I'd like that. Not tonight, not even soon necessarily, but someday, when it feels right. She met his eyes. If that's truly what you want. It is. His voice was quiet but certain. Took me by surprise, feeling this way again. Thought that part of me died with Helen. But watching you these past weeks, seeing your courage today. I'd be honored to call you wife in all ways. Martha's eyes burned with unexpected tears. I didn't think I could trust again. After Robert, after everything, but you've shown me different. Patient and steady and kind. You make me sound like a plow horse, McBride said, but he was smiling. Best compliment I can give. Plow horses are reliable. They do the work that matters. She smiled back. Though you're handsomer than most plow horses. He laughed, the first full laugh she'd heard from him. It transformed his face, showed the younger man beneath the weathering. Come spring, he said. We'll have the Thorntons over. Make it official proper. Have the preacher out from town if you want. I'd like that, a real wedding, not just papers signed in necessity. You deserve that, flowers and a dress and whatever else women want at weddings. I just want you, Martha said, then blushed at her boldness. But McBride's face softened in a way that made the embarrassment worth it. You have me, he said simply. Have had since you knocked on my door half frozen, holding my full notice. The fire burned low as they talked, making plans tentative as spring shoots. Where to build the new rooms, what vegetables to plant in the expanded garden, whether to get more chickens or try for sheep. Ordinary dreams. But Martha had learned the value of ordinary. Grand passion had nearly destroyed her. This quiet building of something real and lasting felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. When she finally retired to her room, Martha left her door unbarred. It was a small gesture, but McBride would understand its meaning. Trust, finally given. Safety, finally believed. In the darkness, she heard him moving overhead, settling for the night. Soon his gentle snoring drifted down, familiar now as her own heartbeat. Outside, wind sang through pines. One of the cats, probably midnight, padded through the house on some nocturnal errand. All was well. Robert was gone, face down and defeated. The law was on their side. And come spring, she'd marry James McBride properly, with flowers and witnesses and joy instead of desperation. Martha smiled into the darkness. She'd thought her notice answering had been about survival, nothing more. But somewhere between that first knock and tonight's quiet revelations, survival had transformed into living. And living, she was learning, could be its own kind of love. The blizzard struck without warning on a Tuesday evening in late February. McBride had been watching the sky all day, noting the way the clouds stacked heavy and dark against the mountains, how the animals clustered close to shelter. But even he hadn't expected the fury that descended just after dark. Martha was darning socks by the fire when the first winds hit, rattling the windows in their frames. Within minutes, the rattling became a howl, and snow drove sideways past the glass in sheets so thick she couldn't see the barn. It's a bad one, McBride said, adding another log to the fire. Could last days. They worked together to prepare, filling every available container with water before the pump froze, bringing in armloads of wood to stack by the hearth. McBride ventured out once more to check the animals, returning covered in snow and ice, his face red with cold. Chickens are secured, Horses and Rosie have feed," he reported, stamping snow from his boots. "Nothing to do now but wait it out." The storm raged through the night. Martha lay awake listening to the wind scream around the corners of the cabin, feeling the walls shudder with each gust. Snow piled against her window until only darkness showed through. She pulled the quilts higher, grateful for solid walls and a tight roof. By morning, the world had vanished. Snow blocked the windows, turning the cabin into a cave lit only by firelight and the faint glow filtering through gaps near the roof. The wind still howled, but now it had a muffled quality, dampened by the weight of snow surrounding them. "We're buried in," McBride announced after checking the door. It would open only a few inches before hitting a wall of white. "Have to wait for a lull to dig out." Martha had never experienced such complete isolation. Even in the loneliest boarding house rooms, there had been sounds of other people, streets outside, the wider world continuing. Here, they might have been the only two people left alive. "The animals?" she asked. "Barn's built for this. They'll be fine for a few days." He studied her face. "You're not one for closed spaces." "I'll manage." But her voice came out tighter than intended. "Come here." He led her to the kitchen table, pulled out Helen's cookbook. "Might as well make use of the time. You've been wanting to try that complicated cake recipe." It was a transparent distraction, but Martha appreciated it. They spent the morning baking, using ingredients carefully hoarded for special occasions. The familiar rhythms of measuring and mixing, the warmth of the stove, the sweet smells filling the cabin, all pushed back against the storm's oppression. By afternoon, the wind had died to occasional gusts. McBride bundled up and fought his way out through the door, returning with reports from outside. "Snow's up to the eaves on the north side. Going to take some digging to get to the barn." He accepted the coffee she offered gratefully. "But the roof's holding, and we've supplies enough." They settled into an odd rhythm, timeless in the snow-muffled quiet. McBride worked on repairing harness and sharpening tools. Martha knitted and read aloud from his small library. The cats emerged from wherever they'd been weathering the storm, all 5 accounted for, though the gray tabby looked particularly put out by the situation. That evening, as they finished a supper of beans and cornbread, McBride cleared his throat. "I should sleep down here tonight, case the roof shows strain or the fire needs tending." Martha understood. They'd grown closer since the incident with Robert, but certain boundaries remained. McBride had been scrupulous about maintaining proprieties, even as their evening conversations grew longer and more intimate. "That makes sense," she said, though part of her wished for the comfort of knowing he was just upstairs. He made a pallet near the fire while she cleaned up. The domesticity of it struck her. 2 people navigating shared space, careful of each other's comfort. When had his presence become not just tolerable but necessary? "Martha," he said suddenly, "that first day, when you showed up at my door, were you frightened?" She considered the question, desperate more than frightened. I'd run out of options. But walking into a stranger's house, accepting an arrangement like ours, that took nerve. Or foolishness. "No." His voice was firm. "I've been thinking about it. The trust that took... I offered shelter, but you offered trust. That's the greater gift." Martha felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You made it easy to trust the way you were straightforward, no false promises." Still, he poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling. "I'm grateful you took the chance." They sat quietly after that, listening to the storm's renewed assault on the walls. Martha found herself studying his profile in the firelight, the strong jaw, the lines carved by sun and wind, the gray threading through his dark hair. When had looking at him become a comfort? "James," she said, using his name deliberately, "can I ask you something?" He turned to her, waiting. "Do you think Helen would approve of us? I mean, of what we're becoming?" His face softened. "I know she would." Helen believed in second chances, in life continuing. She'd have liked you, your strength, your way with the animals. He smiled. She'd have especially loved how you handled Finch. Tell me about her. And he did, speaking more freely than ever before, about their meeting at a church social. Both past the age when most married, their quiet courtship, built on shared values and mutual respect. The early years learning each other's ways. The middle years when love had grown deep as tree roots. The final year, when illness came swift and merciless. I thought I'd die too, he admitted. Not dramatic-like, just stop like a clock winding down. Then winter ended, spring came, and I was still here. The animals needed tending, the ranch needed working. Life went on whether I wanted it to or not. I'm sorry, Martha said softly. Don't be. Grief's part of loving. Can't have one without risking the other. He met her eyes. Question is whether the loving's worth the potential grief. Helen was, and I'm beginning to think you might be too. Martha's breath caught. It was the closest he'd come to a declaration. James, I know we agreed to take time, and we will, but being trapped here with you, no escape from each other, it's shown me something. I don't feel trapped. I feel settled, like this is how it's supposed to be. She rose from her chair, crossed to where he sat, and did something she'd been wanting to do for weeks. She kissed him, just a brief press of lips, tentative and questioning. But he responded, hand coming up to cup her cheek, deepening the kiss into something that promised without demanding. When they separated, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. Martha, I know, we agreed to wait, but the storm, and you talking about Helen, and I just needed you to know that I'm not just amenable anymore. I'm certain. His thumb stroked her cheek. So am I, but I want to do this proper, court you like you deserve, not like some arrangement between strangers. We're not strangers anymore. No, he agreed. We're not. They stayed like that a moment longer. Then Martha reluctantly returned to her chair. The fire crackled between them, but the distance felt different now, temporary rather than fixed. The storm continued through the night. Martha retired to her room eventually, but sleep came slowly. She could hear James moving around, tending the fire, checking the windows, protective even in small ways. Near dawn, silence woke her. The wind had finally died. She dressed quickly and found James already working to clear the door. Storms passed, he said, skies clearing. Together they dug a path from house to barn, the work warming them despite the bitter cold. The world that emerged was transformed, sculptured in white, pristine and glittering in the early sun. Drifts rose higher than their heads in places, while other spots were swept nearly bare. The animals had weathered the storm well. The chickens complained loudly about their confinement, while Rosie seemed merely annoyed at the delay in milking. The horses nickered greetings, breath steaming in the cold air. See, James said, built to last, this place. But Martha heard what he wasn't saying. They were built to last too, their partnership proven by shared crisis. The next days were spent digging out, checking for damage, restoring normal rhythms. But something had shifted during their snowbound time. Small touches became common. His hand on her back as they passed in the kitchen, her fingers brushing his when she handed him coffee. The careful distance they'd maintained was dissolving like snow in spring sun. One evening, as Martha read aloud by the fire, she felt him watching her. When she looked up, his expression made her heart skip. What? Just thinking how different this winter's been. Last year I sat here alone, counting days till spring. This year, he gestured at the room cats draped over furniture, her knitting in its basket, both their cups on the table. This year I'm in no hurry for winter to end. Even being trapped by blizzards. Especially then. He paused. Martha, I know we said spring for the wedding, but would you think less of me if I said I'm impatient? She set the book aside. How impatient. Soon as the road's clear to town, soon as the preacher can come. He leaned forward. I want you to be my wife proper. Want to stop being careful about proprieties. He stopped, color rising. Yes, Martha said simply. Yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to soon. Yes to stopping being careful. She smiled at his expression. James McBride, are you really so surprised we've been dancing around this for weeks? Dancing, he repeated, then laughed. Is that what we've been doing? A very slow, careful dance, but I'm ready for the music to change. He rose, crossed to her chair, and drew her to her feet. No music but the wind. That's enough. And it was. They swayed together there by the fire, her head against his chest, his arms strong around her. The cats watched with lazy interest. Outside, wind sang through pines and snow settled deeper. 2 weeks, he murmured into her hair. Roads should be clear in 2 weeks. I can wait 2 weeks. I've waited years for this. For you. They stayed like that, dancing to wind song, while the fire burned low. Martha thought about the notice that had brought her here, those sparse words that had seemed like desperation at the time. Need a wife, have a home. Such simple needs, such profound gifts when offered honestly. I love you, she said, the words coming easier than expected. I didn't think I would, didn't mean to, but I do. His arms tightened. I love you too. Didn't think I could again, but you've proved me wrong in the best way. Later, after he'd banked the fire and she'd prepared for bed, Martha paused at her door. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, he confirmed. Then you can move your things upstairs. It was the first direct reference to sharing his bed, and Martha felt heat flood her cheeks. But she met his eyes steadily. I'll be ready. His smile was worth the boldness. So will I. That night, for the first time, Martha fell asleep imagining a future that stretched beyond mere survival. A future with shared beds and expanded gardens. Perhaps children to fill those rooms he wanted to build. A future where blizzards meant companionship rather than isolation. Where trust grew deeper each season. Where love was built on foundation of mutual respect and daily kindness. Outside, snow began to fall again. Gentle this time. But inside was warm and safe and home. Inside was love. Unexpected but no less real for its practical beginnings. Inside was everything she'd never dared hope for. Delivered by a man who'd simply said he needed a wife and meant he needed a partner, a companion. A love to warm his life like fire in winter. 2 weeks, then Mrs. McBride in truth, not just in name. Martha smiled into the darkness and began to count the days. Spring came slowly to Montana that year, fighting winter for every inch of ground. By mid-March, patches of brown showed through the white, and the sound of running water filled the air as snow melted from the mountains. McBride walked the property each morning, checking for winter damage and planning the season's work. Martha had taken to joining him on these walks, learning the boundaries of their land. The places where wild roses would bloom come summer, the hidden springs that never froze. This morning, they stood at the eastern edge where McBride wanted to expand. Could clear this section, he said, gesturing at a stand of young pines. Make room for that garden you're wanting. Maybe build a greenhouse against the south wall of the house. A greenhouse? Martha couldn't hide her delight. That seems extravagant. Practical. More like, extend the growing season. Start seedlings early. He glanced at her. Besides, a man's allowed to spoil his wife some. Wife. They'd been married 2 weeks now. A simple ceremony in the cabin with just the Thorntons and the circuit preacher. Martha wore her best dress with wildflowers in her hair. James had cleaned up so well she'd hardly recognized him. Beard trimmed neat and wearing a suit that smelled of cedar. The ceremony itself had been brief, but the words had weight. When James said, I do, his voice carried the same certainty he brought to everything. When he kissed her, It was with a tenderness that made Anna Thornton dab at her eyes. Now Martha wore his ring, a simple gold band he'd bought in Bozeman, and slept in the upstairs room that had been his alone. The adjustment had been easier than expected. James was a considerate husband in all ways, patient with her lingering hesitations, gentle in his approaches. "You're thinking deep thoughts," he observed, pulling her back to the present. "Good thoughts," she assured him, "about greenhouses and gardens and—" She gestured at the land around them. "All of this, sometimes I can't believe it's real." "It's real." He took her hand, thumb rubbing over her wedding ring. "Real as morning." They continued their walk, discussing practicalities. Where to put the chicken run, whether to try potatoes this year, if the old apple trees might be coaxed back to bearing. Normal conversation for a ranch couple. But Martha treasured the normalcy. Back at the house, she started bread while James worked on repairing winter-damaged fencing. Through the window, she watched him work, noting the efficient movements, the way he paused occasionally to pat one of the horses or scratch Brutus behind the ears. The cats had adjusted to the new arrangements with typical feline pragmatism. They still gathered in the main room each evening, but now Brutus often followed them upstairs, curling at the foot of their bed like a small guardian. "He's protecting his territory," James had said the first night it happened. "What territory is that?" Martha had asked. "You, apparently. He's decided you're his to guard." It was mid-afternoon when unexpected visitors arrived. Martha was in the garden plot, turning soil and dreaming of vegetables, when she heard horses, multiple horses, moving fast. James appeared from behind the barn, hammer still in hand. His face went carefully neutral as 3 riders approached, well-dressed men who didn't look like ranch hands or neighbors. "Gentlemen," James said as they reined in, "something I can help you with." The lead rider, a thin man with sharp features, dismounted. "Mr. McBride, I'm Harold Garrett, attorney at law. I represent certain interests in Helena." Martha's stomach clenched. Lawyers meant trouble. She moved closer to James, who shifted slightly to include her in his protective stance. "What interests?" James asked. "Railroad interests, Mr. McBride. The Northern Pacific. Specifically," Garrett pulled papers from his saddlebag, "we're prepared to make you a very generous offer for your land." "Land's not for sale." "Perhaps you should hear the offer before refusing." Garrett named a sum that made Martha's eyes widen. It was more money than she'd dreamed of, enough to buy a dozen ranches. But James shook his head. "Not interested." "Mr. McBride, surely you understand progress is coming whether we like it or not. The railroad will pass through this valley. We can do this the easy way, with fair compensation, or—" He let the threat hang. "Or—" James's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Or we invoke eminent domain, take the land anyway, for far less money." Garrett's smile was cold. "I'm trying to help you here. Take the offer. Start fresh somewhere else." "This is our home," Martha said, surprising herself by speaking up. "We're not leaving." Garrett's eyes flicked to her dismissively. "Mrs. McBride, I presume perhaps you could help your husband see reason. This offer won't stand forever." "My wife and I are in agreement," James said. "The answer is no." "Then you're a fool." Garrett remounted, his companions following suit. "We'll be back, Mr. McBride, and next time, we won't be so generous." They watched the men ride off in silence. Then James turned to Martha, concern creasing his brow. "You all right?" "Are we in trouble?" "Maybe. Railroad's been pushing through Montana for years. They usually get what they want, eventually." He studied their land, seeing it perhaps as the railroad did, the perfect route through the valley. "But they'll have to go through me to get it." That evening, the Thorntons came by, faces grim. "You get visitors today?" Ben Thornton asked. "Railroad lawyers." James confirmed. You. Same. Offered to buy us out. Anna's scared. They discussed strategies, legal options, ways to resist. But Martha heard the undercurrent of worry. The railroad had money, lawyers, government backing. What did small ranchers have except stubbornness? After the Thorntons left, Martha found James on the porch, staring at the mountains. She settled beside him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Would it be so bad? She asked quietly. Taking the money, starting over somewhere else. He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Helen's buried on this land, up on the hill under the big pine. I promised her I'd stay, keep the place going. Martha's heart ached for him. She'd understand if... It's not just that. He turned to her. This is where I brought you, where we built what we have. Every fence post, every building, every cleared field represents years of my life, our life now. How do I put a price on that? You don't, Martha said firmly. We don't. We fight. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. Could get ugly. Railroad doesn't play fair when it wants something. Neither did Robert. We handled him. This is different. Bigger. Then we'll need bigger help. Martha's mind was already working. That lawyer in Bozeman Davidson. He seemed honest. Maybe he knows railroad law. It's worth asking. James sighed. I'm sorry. Martha, you signed on for a quiet life, not a fight with robber barons. I signed on for you, she corrected. Everything else is just weather to get through. Remember? He smiled at having his own words quoted back. How'd I get so lucky? You posted a very honest notice. They sat together as darkness fell, hands linked, facing an uncertain future. But Martha found she wasn't afraid. She'd faced poverty, abandonment, threats from her past. This was just another challenge, one they'd meet together. Over the following days, life continued its rhythms despite the looming threat. Martha planted her garden with seeds saved and traded, coaxing green shoots from the warming earth. James worked on the planned additions to the house, determined to build their future even as others tried to steal it. The cats seemed to sense the tension. Brutus stayed closer than usual, following Martha from room to room. Even the shy gray tabby had taken to sleeping inside regularly, as if circling the wagons against threat. A week after the lawyer's visit, James returned from town with a thick envelope. From Davidson, he said. He's been researching. They read together by lamplight, parsing legal language. The news was mixed. The railroad did have eminent domain rights, but the process was complex. They'd need to prove the route through McBride land was essential, that no alternatives existed, and fair compensation was required, though fair was subject to interpretation. So we have time, Martha said, and grounds to fight. Maybe. Davidson suggests we band together with other affected ranchers, file joint protests, hire our own surveyors to suggest alternate routes. James rubbed his face. It'll cost money we don't have to spare. Then we'll find it, sell some cattle, maybe take on extra work. Martha covered his hand with hers. We've made it this far on determination. We can make it further. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, James said, I keep thinking about that first day. You showing up half frozen, holding my notice. If you'd known it would lead to this. I'd have come anyway, Martha interrupted. James, I've been running my whole life. From bad decisions, from trouble, from myself. This is the first place I've wanted to stand and fight for, because it's ours. He pulled her closer, and she felt the tension in his body ease. We'll fight then, together. Together, she agreed. Outside, a spring storm rolled in, bringing rain instead of snow. Martha listened to it drum on the roof, the sound of life returning, of seeds sprouting, of rivers running full, the sound of change, inevitable as sunrise. But inside was warmth and love and determination. Inside was home, worth any fight to keep. The railroad might have money and power, but Martha and James had something more. Roots sunk deep in Montana soil. Love grown from practical beginnings into something unshakable. And the stubborn courage of people with everything to lose and everything to fight for. Let them come with their lawyers and threats. The McBrides would be ready. In the darkness, Brutus padded upstairs and settled at the foot of the bed, purring his warrior's song. Stand guard, Martha thought. They'd all stand guard over this life they'd built, this unexpected love they'd found. And somehow, some way, they'd prevail, because that's what partners did. Face the storms together and emerge stronger for the weathering. The rain continued through the night, washing winter's last traces away, preparing the ground for whatever came next. And Martha McBride slept peaceful in her husband's arms, ready for tomorrow's battles because she no longer faced them alone. The railroad situation loomed over them through April and May, but life on the ranch demanded attention to immediate needs. Martha's garden began to flourish, neat rows of vegetables pushing through the soil. The expanded chicken run housed new hens, their contented clucking adding to the morning symphony. And slowly, as spring deepened towards summer, the worry lines around James's eyes began to ease. It was a June evening, warm and golden. When Martha felt the first flutter, she was washing dishes. James reading aloud from a new book Anna Thornton had lent them. When the sensation came, like butterfly wings inside her, she went very still, hand pressed to her belly. Martha, James looked up from the book. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Her voice came out wondering. James, I think I'm with child. The book slipped from his hands. He crossed to her in 2 strides, face a mixture of joy and concern. You think? I've suspected for weeks, but now. She took his hand, placed it where she'd felt the movement. There, feel that. They stood frozen, hardly breathing. Then it came again, the faintest flutter against his palm. James's face transformed, years falling away in his smile. A baby, he breathed. Our baby. Martha laughed, tears starting. Are you happy? Happy. He cupped her face in his hands. Martha, I don't have words. I thought this chance had passed me by. We'll need those extra rooms you've been building. We'll need everything. He pulled her close, careful now, as if she might break. When how long? October. I think maybe November? She'd been counting days, watching for signs. I wanted to be sure before I told you. That night, they lay awake making plans. Names were debated, nursery locations discussed. James's hand rarely left her still flat belly, as if he could protect the life growing there through touch alone. We can't let the railroad take our home now, he said fiercely. Our child deserves to grow up here, on this land. Then we won't let them, Martha said simply. The next morning brought unexpected allies. A delegation of ranchers arrived, led by Ben Thornton and including faces Martha recognized from church and town. They gathered in the yard, hats in hands, faces determined. We've been talking, Ben said, about this railroad business. Figured it's time we stopped fighting separate and started fighting together. What did you have in mind? James asked. Pooling resources, hiring that Bozeman lawyer proper-like, making enough noise that the territorial government has to listen. An older rancher, Ezra Walsh, spat tobacco juice. A railroad thinks we're just dumb sodbusters. Time to show them different. They formed the Eagle Creek Ranchers Association that day, each family contributing what they could to a legal fund. Martha served coffee and sandwiches, listening to the men plan resistance with the same careful attention they'd give to planning a harvest. My Sarah's expecting too, Anna Thornton told Martha quietly. Due around the same time as you, from the look of it. Martha hadn't realized she was showing, but Anna's knowing eye missed little. Does it get easier, the worry? No, Anna said honestly. But it gets familiar, and the joy outweighs the fear, most days. As summer progressed, two battles were fought simultaneously. The legal fight against the railroad proceeded in fits and starts. Petitions filed. Surveys conducted. Meetings held with territorial officials who made promises they might or might not keep. The ranchers learned to navigate bureaucracy with the same stubborn patience they used to break new ground. Meanwhile, Martha's body changed daily. Her dresses had to be let out, then replaced entirely. Morning sickness gave way to fierce hunger. The baby's movements grew stronger, visible now through the fabric of her dress. James watched it all with wonder. He'd hover as she worked, ready to lift anything heavy. He'd talk to her belly in the evenings, telling the baby about the ranch, about the mountains, about the life waiting. "You're going to spoil this child rotten," Martha teased one night as he sang an off-key lullaby to her stomach. "That's a father's prerogative," he replied, unrepentant. The cat seemed to understand something had changed. Brutus appointed himself Martha's constant guardian, while even the shy gray tabby would curl near her chair, purring. One evening, Midnight jumped onto her lap, then immediately jumped off, startled by the baby's kick. "Even the cats are protective," James observed. "They know their world's about to change too." August brought a heat wave and bad news. The railroad had filed official claim to several parcels, including a corner of McBride land, not the whole ranch, but enough to destroy its integrity, to make working the rest difficult, if not impossible. "They're dividing us," Ben Thornton said at an emergency meeting. "Taking pieces from each ranch, hoping we'll give up and sell the rest cheap." "Then we don't sell," James said flatly. "We make them take us to court for every acre." The legal battles intensified. Davidson proved worth his fee, finding procedural errors in the railroad's filings, demanding proper assessments and hearings. Each delay cost the railroad money, made their investors nervous. "They're used to folks rolling over," Davidson explained. "Fighting back changes their calculations." September arrived with cooler air and Martha's increasing difficulty moving around. Her back ached constantly, and her ankles swelled by evening. But she maintained the house, preserved the garden's bounty, and attended every rancher's meeting, taking notes in her careful hand. "You should rest," James fretted. "I'll rest when the railroad gives up," Martha retorted. It was a Sunday evening in late September when the pain started. Martha had been canning the last of the tomatoes when the first cramp hit, strong enough to make her gasp. She gripped the table, breathing through it. "Just practice," she told herself. But when the next one came, stronger still, she knew better. "James," she called, voice carefully level. "I think you should fetch Anna." He was beside her instantly. "The baby. Soon, I think. Get Anna. She'll know what to do." The next hours blurred together. Anna arrived with Sarah in tow, her own baby just 2 weeks old. The women took charge, sending James to boil water and gather clean linens. Martha found herself relegated to bed, body overtaken by forces beyond her control. "First babies take their time," Anna soothed between contractions. "Just breathe, honey. Your body knows what to do." But knowing and doing were different things. The pains intensified through the night, each wave threatening to pull Martha under. She heard James pacing downstairs, heard Anna's calm instructions to Sarah, heard the cat's yowling sympathy from outside the door. Dawn was breaking, painting the mountains pink, when the urge to push became undeniable. "That's it," Anna encouraged. "Baby's ready to meet you." 3 pushes, 3 moments of effort beyond anything Martha had imagined. Then a cry, thin but strong, and Anna's delighted laugh. "It's a girl, a beautiful, perfect girl." Martha reached for her daughter with trembling arms. The baby was red and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Love hit like a physical force, stealing what breath she had left. "James," she whispered. "Bring James." He was there instantly, as if he'd been waiting just outside. His face when he saw their daughter was something Martha would remember forever. Awe and terror and love all mingled. "She's so small," he breathed, one finger touching the baby's fist. The tiny fingers gripped immediately, holding tight. "Small but fierce." Anna said, "Like her mother." "What will you call her?" Martha and James looked at each other. They'd discussed names for months, but seeing her made the choice clear. "Helen," Martha said. "Helen Hope McBride." James's eyes filled. "You're sure? She deserves to carry the name of a strong woman and hope for the future." Martha traced their daughter's features. "Is that all right?" "It's perfect." He kissed Martha's forehead. "Then the babies. She's perfect." The next days passed in a haze of feedings and diapers, of learning this tiny person's needs and rhythms. James moved a comfortable chair into the bedroom so Martha could nurse easily. The cats were eventually allowed to investigate, Brutus sniffing the baby with great seriousness before apparently approving. It was a week after Helen's birth when Ben Thornton arrived with news that would change everything. "Railroad's pulling back," he said, grinning wide. "Got word from Helena. They're rerouting through the northern pass, going to cost them millions more. But our legal challenges made the southern route too uncertain." Martha, holding Helen, felt tears start. "We won. We won. Land's safe. All of it." James sank into a chair, relief making him look younger. "I can't believe it." "Believe it? Seems the investors got nervous about the delays, the cost overruns, decided the northern route was better business." Ben clapped James's shoulder. "We did it. All of us together." That evening, as September sunset painted the sky, Martha sat on the porch with Helen sleeping in her arms, James beside her. The cats arranged around them like a blessing. The land stretched out before them. Their land, saved through community and stubbornness and refusal to give up. "She'll grow up here," James said softly. "Learn to ride where her mother walked, plant gardens where you planted them. Tell her stories about how her parents met," Martha added, "about a notice on a post and a desperate woman and a lonely man. About how love grows in unexpected places. About fighting for what matters." Helen stirred, making small sounds. Martha adjusted her position, marveling at how natural it already felt. This child, this life, this love. None of it had been in her plans that cold day she'd answered James's notice. But here it was, real as sunrise, solid as the mountains. "Thank you," she told James. "For the notice, for taking a chance on a stranger, for all of it." "Thank you," he replied, "for being brave enough to answer, for teaching me to hope again, for our daughter." They sat quietly as stars emerged, one by one, inside. Coffee cooled on the stove and chores waited. But for this moment, everything necessary was here. Family whole and safe, land secured, future bright with possibility. Somewhere in the barn, a cat caught a mouse. In the henhouse, chickens settled for the night. And on the porch of a ranch that had weathered all storms, the McBride family welcomed another Montana night, another page in their continuing story. The notice that had started it all was long gone, used for kindling some winter evening, but its promise lived on in every breath their daughter drew, every sunset they watched together, every morning they woke to face whatever came. "You need a home, I need a wife." Such simple words to build a life on, such a mighty foundation they'd prove to be. Asterisk, 30 years later. Asterisk. The journal lay open on the kitchen table, its pages yellowed with age, but the handwriting still clear. Helen Hope McBride Lawson paused in her reading to pour another cup of coffee, smiling at the familiar words. He wrote the shortest proposal. Asterisk, her grandmother Martha's journal entry read, "You need a home, I need a wife." 8 words that changed everything. Asterisk. Helen touched the pages gently. Her grandmother had passed 5 winters ago. Her grandfather James following just 6 months later, unable or unwilling to face the seasons without her. But their story lived on in these carefully kept journals, in the ranch that still bore the McBride name, and in the families that had grown from their union. "Mama, you reading Grandma's book again?" Helen looked up as her eldest daughter, Margaret, entered the kitchen. At 15, Margaret had Martha's determined chin and James's steady gray eyes. "Just the part about how they met. Your father wants me to tell it at the church social next week." Margaret poured her own coffee. When had she gotten old enough for coffee, and sat beside her mother? "Tell it right, then. Don't leave out the cats attacking that awful man." Helen laughed. "Brutus was legendary, though he was ancient by the time you were born." "I remember him. Orange and battle-scarred and absolutely devoted to Grandma." Margaret traced a finger along the journal's edge. "Do you think it really happened just like she wrote? It seems so romantic for Grandpa. He was always so quiet." "The quiet ones run deep," Helen said, remembering her grandfather's gentle hands teaching her to milk Rosie's successor, his patience with her childish questions, the way he'd looked at Martha when he thought no one was watching. "And yes, I believe it happened just as she wrote. Your grandmother wasn't one for embellishment." She turned back to the journal, finding the entry she'd been looking for. "Today marks 30 years since I answered that notice. 30 years since I walked through snow to find a new life. James asked me this morning if I had any regrets. I told him only one, that we didn't have more time. But then I look at what we built together. The children and grandchildren. The ranch that survived all attempts to break it. And I think perhaps we had exactly the time we needed." Asterisk. The cats are long gone. Even Midnight, who lived to the remarkable age of 22. But their descendants still patrol the barn and porch. Helen Hope has James's way with them. Quiet and sure. She'll make a fine rancher's wife herself someday, if that's the path she chooses. Asterisk. James still plays his harmonica in the evenings. His hair is white now. His hands not as steady, but the melodies are the same ones that echoed through our first winter together. Sometimes I catch him watching me with the same wonder he had that night in the blizzard when we first kissed. "Still can't believe you answered that fool notice," he'll say, and I'll tell him what I always tell him. Best 8 words I ever read. Asterisk. Helen closed the journal carefully. Outside, she could hear her husband David working with the horses, their younger children helping as best they could, the sounds of a working ranch, unchanged from her grandparents' time. "Will you write it down?" Margaret asked. "The whole story. Not just for the church social, but properly, so my children can read it someday." Helen considered this. She'd inherited Martha's gift for words along with James's love of the land. "Maybe I will. It's a story worth preserving properly." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch that had been her world entire. The cabin had been expanded over the years, the promised extra rooms built, a proper parlor added, modern conveniences slowly incorporated. But the heart of it remained the same, a place built on mutual need that had grown into mutual love. The original notice, that spare, honest proposal, had been lost to time, but Helen had commissioned a copy, framed now above the mantel where the rifle once hung. "Oh, you need a home. I need a wife. Have land. Have shelter. Don't need love. Just need honest. J. McBride." How wrong he'd been about not needing love. How beautifully, blessedly wrong. "Mama," Margaret said, joining her at the window. "Do you think people still find each other that way through honesty instead of pretty words?" Helen put an arm around her daughter. "I think people find each other all sorts of ways, but the ones who last are the ones who build something real together, who face the storms as partners, who choose each other again every morning, even when, especially when, it's hard." A truck rumbled up the drive. Modern times, encroaching even here. But the young man who got out and headed for the barn with a wave could have been James 40 years ago, same steady gait, same quiet confidence. This was Tom. the neighbor's son who'd been courting Margaret with the same patient determination James had shown Martha. "Speaking of choosing," Helen said with a smile. Margaret blushed, but didn't look away from the window. "He asked Papa if he could take me to the dance Saturday. And Papa said yes, but Tom has to help with the branding first. Wants to see if he's serious." Helen laughed. "Your father did the same thing to every boy who came calling for me. Your grandfather's tradition." They watched Tom disappear into the barn. Then Margaret asked, "What do you think makes a good marriage, really?" Helen thought of her grandparents, of her own parents, of her marriage to David. All different, but all built on similar foundations. "Respect," she said finally. "Shared work, patience with each other's faults, joy in small things, and the willingness to stay when leaving would be easier." She squeezed Margaret's shoulder. "But mostly, I think it's about finding someone you can be honest with, someone who sees who you really are and chooses you anyway." Later that evening, Helen sat down with fresh paper and her grandmother's pen. The church social story would be one thing, a short, sweet tale of romance and cats and happy endings. But Margaret was right. The full story deserved telling. She wrote, "My grandmother Martha always said she wasn't looking for love when she answered that notice. She was looking for survival, for shelter, for a chance to stop running. My grandfather James claimed he was only looking for help with the ranch, someone to keep house and share the work. Neither expected what grew between them, a love as deep-rooted as the pines on the mountains, as enduring as the Montana winters they weathered together." Asterisk. But perhaps that's the secret. Perhaps the greatest loves aren't the ones that arrive in lightning strikes and grand gestures. Perhaps they're the ones that grow slowly, steadily, built on daily kindnesses and shared struggles and the simple act of showing up for each other when showing up is hard. Asterisk. They were married 43 years, raised 4 children, saw 11 grandchildren born, fought off railroad barons and hard winters and everything else that threatened their life together. When Martha died, James said the only thing he regretted was not finding her sooner. When he followed her 6 months later, we found he'd kept every note she'd ever written him, even grocery lists, tied with a ribbon in his desk drawer. Asterisk. You need a home. I need a wife. 8 words. A practical proposal from a practical man. But oh, what an impractical, impossible, wonderful love grew from those words. Asterisk. The ranch remains in our family. The cats, great-great-grandchildren of Brutus and Midnight, still patrol the barn. And sometimes, on cold winter nights when the wind howls around the corners of the cabin, I swear I can hear my grandfather's harmonica and my grandmother's laugh, still echoing through the rooms they made into a home. Asterisk. Not all love stories start with poetry. Sometimes they start with need, with loneliness, with 2 people brave enough to try building something together. Sometimes they start with 8 simple words and grow into a lifetime of choosing each other, again and again, season after season, until death and beyond. Asterisk. That's the story of James and Martha McBride, a cowboy widower and a desperate woman, a notice on a post and a chance taken, a love built on honesty, strengthened by adversity, and proved by time. Asterisk. May we all be so lucky as to find someone who needs what we offer and offers what we need. May we all be so brave as to answer when opportunity knocks, even when it comes disguised as desperation. And may we all build loves that last not just for lightning strike moments, but for all the ordinary days that make a life. Asterisk. For, in the end, that's what my grandparents taught me, that true love isn't found. It's built, one day, one kindness, one shared challenge at a time. Asterisk. And it often starts with the simplest of words, honestly offered and bravely accepted. Asterisk. Helen set down her pen and read what she'd written. Not perfect, but true, like the love it described. Outside, the Montana night settled over the ranch. In the barn, cats hunted mice as they had for generations. In the house that James built and Martha made a home, another generation of McBrides prepared for sleep, for tomorrow, for all the seasons yet to come. And somewhere in the wind that sang through the pines, if you listened closely, you might hear it still, the echo of a harmonica, a woman's contented sigh, and the whisper of 8 words that started it all. You need a home, I need a wife. Simple words, honest words, words that built a love strong enough to echo through time, inspiring all who heard the tale to believe in second chances, in practical magic, and in the extraordinary possibilities hidden in the most ordinary beginnings. The story was written, the legacy secured, and in a cabin at the foot of the Montana mountains, love continued to grow, season by season, generation by generation, as enduring as the land itself. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope it touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Please share in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know where in the world this tale of Martha and James has reached. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 for more authentic stories from America's frontier days. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and hit that hype button to help more people discover these timeless tales of love, courage, and the American West. Until next time, partners.